what ASBPA shows is that you have to reach out to people outside of the basic beach or shoreline. The effort is really to educate the people further inland, to let them know that this isn't just building a beach for beachgoers. This actually helps protect everybody. It gives you, in the light of sea level rise, it gives you the protection you need to protect the infrastructure behind it, avoid having huge costs there, protect the whole commerce of the area. And without that, everything will actually act like a deck of cards and just collapse.
Welcome to Shaping Shores, the Centennial podcast of the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. For 100 years, ASBPA has united people across science, policy, and practice to preserve U.S. shores and beaches. If you are listening, you should be one of these people. Become a member or make a gift today at asbpa.org. I'm your host, Nicole Elko, ASBPA's Executive Director. And today we continue our ongoing series with ASBPA's Coastal Champions, discussing how we're shaping the shores of tomorrow. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Henry Schorr, Vice President of Manson Construction Company, based in Jacksonville, Florida. Henry, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Nicole, it's great to be here, and I'm excited to be able to participate with the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association's 100th year. It's obviously a thrill to be associated with an organization such as this. Beachville and the efforts it takes to commence with that type of work and to fund it can't be done without organizations like ASBPA. And ASBPA is the grandfather of all of them. Started before any of them, and they're a great model for other entities to emulate in trying to advance this effort forward. It's wonderful to be here, and nice to have a good conversation, and enjoy seeing you again.
In today's episode, we're going to talk a lot about hopper dredging for beach renourishment projects. So traditionally, hopper dredges would just dump material by opening the doors on the bottom of the vessel. But now the introduction of pump out capability, where we're sending sand through a pipeline over the bow of the ship, is kind of a new thing that came to be during your career, right, Henry?
Yes, it is. And pump out capability is really the ability of a dredge, as you mentioned, to take material out of the hopper, pump it through an extended pipeline, sometimes up to 15,000 feet, 3 miles, and just dispose of that material onto the beach and create the beach itself.
We would love to know where you started and kind of how beach work entered the picture and when. I know probably not right away.
Yeah, so I know people don't want to hear about me. They want to hear about ASBPA. But I started my career in 1979 working for T.L. James and assisted in developing the hopper dredge entity, Gulf Coast Trailing. We started off with the Atchafalaya, Mermentau, and then in the 80s we built the Washita, which later became the B. Lindholm, after purchased by Weeks. So during that time frame, we embarked on a number of beachfill projects, including Salt Air, Fire Island Pines, both up off of Long Island. Then we modified the Washita to have pump out capability. And then we started her off on various beachfill projects, starting with Duval County here in Jacksonville. So we progressed quite a bit in that realm. Then in 1998, T.L. James sold the dredging entities, including Gulf Coast Trailing, to Weeks Marine. I stayed with Weeks for a short period during transition, and then moved to Manson Construction in 1999. Coincidentally, I joined Manson right at the christening of the dredge Bayport. At the time, the Bayport did not have pump-out capability. Shortly after 1999, we brought her around to the East Coast. We subsequently added a pump-out capability to her so we could start commencing beachfill projects. We worked at Fort Pierce. We worked various other places up and down the East Coast with her. Then in Then we started the construction of the hopper dredge Glen Edwards, which at the time was the largest self-propelled hopper dredge in the U.S. So again, we built her without a pump out capability. We added it after the fact. I'm sorry, we added it during the construction, but it wasn't an elaborate system. It was a pretty basic system, but it allowed us to compete in the beach build market. So we worked her down in Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, Alabama. Then we've worked her all up and down the East Coast. 3 big projects up off in New Jersey at Long Branch and Deal. And then we've worked her most recently. I mean, we've done Fort Story, Virginia. We just recently completed some work up in Virginia Beach. And then we've worked various other jobs, Jupiter Island and others. In the meantime, we were designing the Frederick Pop. The Frederick Pop will be our newest dredge. It is ownership is being transferred supposedly very shortly, and she will commence work. She will be the largest hopper dredge in the U.S. We already have work lined up for her, but she is much more efficient in her pump out capability than the Glen Edwards. So Manson's fully committed into this market. We think it's a booming market. We've seen that from our competitors as well. They've all added additional pump out capability to be able to furnish the beaches with sand and give us the coastal protection we all need. So we've got that in our future going forward. It's been a long career for me here so far, but this is really an elaborate effort to maintain the beaches. We've also had our cutter dredge Robert White maintaining marshes and rebuilding marshes and coastal work down in Louisiana and the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So all those combined really helps to protect the country, the infrastructure, and commerce from rising sea level. And that's where ASBPA comes in. Without them, it's tough to get the funding and the buy-in to proceed with some of these massive projects. And what ASBPA shows is that you have to reach out to people outside of the basic beach or shoreline. And we see that across other entities that are trying to copy ASBPA, including Florida Shore and Beach, Coast Builders out of Louisiana, Texas Gulf Coast Infrastructure Coalition. And the effort is really to educate the people further inland, to let them know that this isn't just building a beach for beachgoers. This actually helps protect everybody. It gives you, in the light of sea level rise, it gives you the protection you need to protect the infrastructure behind it, avoid having huge costs there, protect the whole commerce of the area. And without that, everything will actually act like a deck of cards and just collapse. It'll really, it won't be sustainable long term, and you'll see people having to expend inordinate amounts of money to get out of the way of the beach or any storm event or sea level rise, and that'll have a catastrophic effect on the overall country and not just the people at the beach. But yeah, it's a worthwhile effort and something good for everybody to be involved in. And educating those people further from the coast is critical to getting the funding and the laws and regulations passed in order to proceed forward.
Thanks for flagging that. We're certainly proud of the work that we do in Washington and around the nation to get people on the same page about everything you just said. But let's talk a little bit about the design and construction of some of the fleet's largest dredges that you've been describing here to us. So when you say, you kind of made me think of something. You're saying it might not be the largest dredge, but it might be more efficient, right? So you're talking about pump out capability And that obviously has a tie into if it can do beaches or not. So tell us a little bit about that. The size, the capacity of the hopper itself is one thing, but then there's something else here, right? About how efficiently it can pump out.
Yeah, so the size of the hopper is one thing, and that's measured two different ways. First is volumetrically, so it's what your gross volume of the hopper is. The second element is what is your tonnage carry capacity. Every ship has a load line that you can load down to, which a hopper dredge is a ship, and you're not allowed to exceed that. So depending on the density of the material that you're putting into the hopper, could have a huge differential based on what you're allowed to carry. For example, if you take a hopper dredge of, say, 12,000 cubic yards and you put in material, a mud type material, you could probably carry 12,000 yards. On the other hand, if you put in sand, that's a 1.8, 1.9 density and very heavy, you may be limited to 8,000 cubic yards of sand. Now, obviously, in a beach fill environment, you're going to go to a point, hook up to a pipeline, and have to pump out onto the beach. So it really ends up with a lot more efficient operation, and that really comes out to a lower cost for the owner.
Mm, okay, cool. Yeah, that's helpful for me. Okay, so we've got right into the deep dive on capacity and pump out. But why don't we take a step back for those of our listeners that maybe aren't as familiar with hopper dredges? So give us a basic overview.
Well, a basic overview of a hopper dredge. A hopper dredge is a ship. They're defined as a ship. They are loaded with, you have an open void. She lowers drag arms down to the bottom, and then she pumps through those drag arms to load, and she'll load material from the bottom, depending on what you're going to do with it, and sail to a pump off point and pump that onto the beach. In the video, you're seeing she's lowering the drag arms to the bottom that essentially act like large vacuum cleaners. And you have a turtle deflector on the front end to knock turtles out of the way so we don't entrain them. But then the drag arm goes down to the bottom, as shown here in the video. And when it's down on the bottom, she'll suck up the sand through the drag arm, and it gets deposited into the hopper, just like shown here. Now, the very fine material will get flushed overboard, but the good coarse sand will stay in the hopper. And she'll load that way until she hits a tonnage limit for sand. Now, the mates up on board and the drag tenders, they track all this stuff to watch how she's doing to try and maximize the efficiency of loading. She then sails to a hookup point, and that could be 8, 10, 12, 15 miles, hooks up to a pipeline like shown here, and then she'll start pumping out, in which case she'll discharge the sand that's currently in the hopper, as shown, gets flushed down by jets into a collection pipe underneath, and then gets pumped out of the hopper through the pipeline and ends up on the beach. This particular project you're seeing here is at Cape San Blas, just south of Port St. Joe, Florida. And it was a very challenging project. Obviously, we're 7,000 or 8,000 feet offshore, so a mile and a half. And then she'll pump it through the pipeline on the beach, and then we will spread it with the dozers and everything on the beach to create the template of the beach that's wanted. Obviously, the dunes and everything else involved. You have to maintain it. You have to move the material around. You just don't want a big glob of it. You need to move it around, spread it, so you get a good solid base. The wider it is and the higher it is, the better you are protecting the infrastructure behind it. Obviously, it's a labor-intensive project and equipment-intensive, but overall it gives you a great beach. It is much better than a truck haul beach from the standpoint that a truck haul, when they come in, they just dump the material and spread it. So it's not compacted. It's got a lot of voids in it. Here, when you hydraulically place the material, it'll be packed down by use of the dozers, by use of the hydraulic placement, so it'll be much more stable and much better able to withstand storm events. Once you get all this done, you'll taper it in on the ends so you don't have any severe erosion to impact the beach itself. Uh, Obviously, all longitudinal currents do impact it, and that between that and storm events is the reason you have to constantly re-nourish these. Uh, it not only does it do great for tourists, but it also protects, like you see here, all the houses and the infrastructure behind them, where no matter what happens, you may lose beach in a storm, but the infrastructure behind it will be protected.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was great. So I was thinking as we were watching that video that, wow, we've come a long way, right? And you've seen a lot of this evolution in the dredging industry. So describe to us, like, what did a beach project look like when we were just figuring this stuff out compared to now?
Uh, that's a great question. So beach projects initially were very somewhat ambiguous. You said, well, we want you to put X number of yards here, but we didn't really have the science we do now. And with the longitudinal currents, the data that we've collected over the years to show us how the sand is reacting, what we can do to help mitigate some of that, and enable us to better protect the shoreline. Nowadays, through the various consulting engineers, with help from ASBPA, FSBPA, and the others, we go through these coastal resiliency conferences and review everything that's happening and have a myriad of data showing what's happening to wave action over 20 years or 30 years, what's happening with longitudinal currents over that same time, and how do we adjust the construction of the beach such that we minimize the impacts from longitudinal currents or wave action. Once we have enough data, we can tell when the majority of the wave action is coming, what angle it's going to approach the beach, and how do we design to minimize those impacts and maintain the beach for longer term.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a long evolution, I think, but we're getting pretty good at this. I've even heard the Corps saying now that the beach projects are the easy ones.
And they are. Another thing that ASBPA and others do is they help promote the ability for the Corps to consider, instead of just low-cost, viable option for maintaining channels, what can we do with the material? Can we take the material and create a beach? Can we take it and use it to help enforce the beaches and not have just disposal of it offshore just to maintain the channel? There's so many more benefits that can be, in a lot of cases, that can be realized just from minimizing the disposal of material offshore and putting it on the beach. Places like Palm Beach, Fort Pierce, Kings Bay, St. Mary's Entrance, and other channel projects can actually help assist in maintaining the beaches, downdrift of them, and it really is a dual benefit. Not only do you get the channel clear, but you also maintain the beach at the same time.
Perfect. I was going to ask you about that. So nowadays, right, we call that beneficial use of dredge material.
Right.
And I presume that Manson's involved in several of those projects, and those were some that you just listed, right?
Yes, we are. In fact, yeah, we've done Fort Pierce quite a number of times, getting ready to do it again. But yes, Fort Pierce, Kings Bay, we're up at Virginia Beach right now. We've done a number of them like that. And it really creates a little different set of challenges, but overall it's to the benefit of the overall program and to the benefit of the infrastructure and the entities behind the beach to have it done.
All right. Well, here's a hard question for you. Do you have a favorite dredging story or favorite dredging project that comes to mind over your career?
Uh, ooh, that is a tough one. I've got a number of projects. It's interesting because some people who are not involved in this business and don't understand it, I hear them get a little bit confused by it. For example, in talking over my career with some people who have a 9 to 5 regular job, They go, I can't believe when I got into this that I'd be sitting here 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in front of a computer, just working on something. And I said, well, I've never looked at my career like that. My career has always, to me, has always been an adventure. I mean, you start off, you go to a Tampa deepening project, you go to North Carolina, you go to Maine, you go to even South America and some of the islands in performing projects. So everything was a new adventure every time, and every project is a different project. Every day is different. It's always an adventure. But I guess one of my favorite ones, was the one you showed on the video, was Cape San Blas. As that was the second time we did that project. The first time we did it with the Bayport, put about 2 million yards up on the beach, and it was quite an extensive project. I think this last one was around 900,000 yards. But it was, you get into those large beach fill projects, they can be quite challenging. And Cape San Blas is a very interesting area to work out of Port St. Joe. But it's a nice area. Nice, low key, and really, people out there are really appreciative of the work you do.
Yeah, that's a beautiful part of the country. Successful project as well. So you mentioned about talking to people who maybe don't understand what a career in dredging or even in coastal restoration entails. We've all come across this one, so I'm sure you've had an experience where you've had to clear up a misconception. Like, no, actually, when we dredge, that's not what happens. Or maybe you talk to an environmental regulator, right? I don't think you quite understand the process here. Do you have any experiences to share with us from that kind of perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's when you start talking about some of the environmental restrictions that are put in place. Um, yeah, I hate to pick on turtles, but I guess I will. Um, so we have a turtle window in the southeast that we have to work between essentially December through April. Um, one of my concerns is this was originally put in place back in the 80s because that was the best science at the time of when the turtles were present, when they weren't. We've got a lot more data now that we can expand that window, which will mean a lower cost, but also a probable lower human impact. And by that, I mean, from a safety standpoint, a dredge working offshore in the winter in 6, 8 foot seas is a whole lot different than the dredge working offshore in the summer when you deal with 2 to 3 foot seas. So the crews out there working, people working around the beaches, having to respond in the winter, uh, you know, it, since we have the science now, we should be able to expand those windows appropriately. But yeah, and then again, you talk about some of the other restrictions. The turtle deflector device that was put on the dredges, that was from the 80s, early 80s, as a result of some efforts down in Canaveral. And since then, we've experimented with lights, we've experimented with tickler chains and things like that that could result in lower fuel burn. But in order to get the environmental groups engaged, you have to get them out on the dredge while it's working so they can understand the nuances of it, understand what goes into it, and understand the risk involved with it. And that's sometimes tough to do. A lot of them like to throw regulations at you because it's the easy way out, but they really have to get them out there and have them understand the process and understand the exposures so they can look at it from a more realistic standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. The video you showed was enlightening, but I know from experience that actually there's nothing like actually being on a dredge and being able to see it firsthand. So
Right. And that we're finding the same thing with new Corps employees. As recently the Corps has lost a number of experienced people. Um, and more we're seeing people who know the letter of what you're supposed to do, but don't understand the process or the practical applications of some of that. So we do everything we can to try and get all the Corps inspectors, all the Corps ACOs out to the dredges whenever we can, so they can really see what goes into it and what's involved in some of the things. Because it really becomes a little bit of a conundrum when something gets plugged into your specs that doesn't really apply, yet somebody thinks it does.
Sure. Yeah. So speaking of new people coming into the field, as we're wrapping up our conversation here today, what's some advice you have in general for folks just getting started, maybe in coastal restoration or even in dredging? What's your advice for the new people coming in?
My advice is mainly is get up, get out in the field, and get on the projects and talk to the people on the projects. You don't just go out there for a photo op. Go out there and spend some time and understand the process, understand the project, understand what the challenges are. And the more you look at it and talk to people out there, the better off you'll understand it and better you'll be at your job. Uh, we see instances where people don't want to get out in the field. They want to sit behind a desk. And ultimately, there's a limited amount of applicability they will have with whatever they do. They won't know enough. They won't know enough to know what they don't know.
Absolutely. That's right. Well, go to the beach, people. That's what we're hearing today.
Go to the beach, get on the beach, talk to the people out there, talk to the operators, talk to the foreman. Don't just go out there, take a photo op, and turn around and leave.
Well, thank you for sharing all of your insights with us today. Coastal champion Henry Schorr, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Nicole, and thank you for an ASBPA and all the great work they do. And let's try and proliferate that throughout the nation, because we all need it.
Will do. Well, that's it for today's episode of Shaping Shores. I'm Nicole, and thanks so much for spending part of your day with us. If today's conversation inspired you, help us continue this work. Become a member or make a gift at asbpa.org. To hear more stories from the people preserving U.S. coasts, follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Together, we're shaping a resilient future for our nation's beaches and shores. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again on next week's episode.